We have made it to another webinar here. So thanks everybody for joining. For those of you who I have never met before, my name is Josh Gregory. I lead the consulting and training teams here at Route Consultant. And so that leads to a bunch of different things, but I end up working with both new investors, buyers entering the space, and current contractors, helping everybody make the right decisions and maximize their investment in this space. But for today, if you've never been here, these webinars are designed as a place where we can come, bring you updates, tell you about new things happening in the space, and also answer your questions. So the way today will go, we're going to go through some content beforehand, so things that I want to talk through today, and then we're going to open it up for a pure open Q&A. Now, before we get to that, there is a quick disclaimer that I do have to read, as I do every week. So Route Consultant is not endorsed by and is not recommended by Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. Route Consultant is not sponsored by, is not approved by, is not associated with, and has no connection whatsoever with Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. So all that to say that we do still want this to be a place where you can come, learn, and hopefully hear some helpful information today. And so, as I was just saying, the end of today will be an open Q&A session where you can ask about anything that I talk about today or any questions you have about the FedEx industry at large. Now, when you are typing in your questions, make sure you put it in the Q&A button in the bottom. Don't put it in the chat. If you put it in the chat, I'll miss it. So make sure you put it in the Q&A window. And you can enter those questions at any point as I'm talking today or when we get into the Q&A. You don't have to wait till the Q&A to type those questions in. I'll still see them and get to them. Now, importantly, when we're talking Q&A, before we will answer your question, you first have to answer our question. So the question of the day this week is, what is the dumbest or most ridiculous way that you have gotten injured or injured yourself? So Jesse and I, my co-host, will relay our stories there before we get to the Q&A, but type in that answer before you type in your question, and we'll make sure to get to those live. Now, a couple of things I want to make sure you all know about on the event side. First off is our next New Investor Summit, which is next Friday, July 7th. Now, if you've never heard of the New Investor Summit before, this is a day that's designed to teach you as much as we possibly can to help you make the decision whether or not FedEx is the right industry for you. And if you're going to enter the FedEx space, I want you to do so confidently and with an understanding of the industry. And that's what this summit is designed to do. And this is actually our last virtual summit until December. So if you are a new investor and have not been to one of these, this is going to be the easiest one for you to attend all year because you can do so from your couch. So we have put the link in the chat, and I hope to see some of you guys there. And again, it is Friday, July 7th, so next Friday. So you're running out of time to sign up for it, but we do still have a couple of spots left. Other big event that is upcoming is the big Contractor Expo that is happening July 29th through the 30th in Vegas. It's back at the Paris Hotel. Again, for those of you who have never been, this is a time for us to get together. We will talk about some of the things we're going to be talking about today, but also things like how Express is going to be affecting the FedEx space, ways you can diversify, a bunch of different things around that. And we actually have the full panel schedule and list of content online on our website, so you can go ahead and see what these different sessions will look like. But this is completely free. We will cover the food, we will cover the drinks, we will cover the entertainment. The only thing you have to do is register, which is free, and then get there and then reserve a hotel. So the hotel is at a discounted rate. That won't last forever, and we do still have some discounted hotel blocks on our website. So make sure you go ahead, if you're online and planning on coming but just haven't registered yet, go ahead and lock in the hotel so that you get to hold on to that rate. Again, the link for that is on our website, should be in the chat as well. And hopefully I will get to see some of you there. That is in person. It's always one of the best things about the expo is having contractors and everybody come together and actually getting to see each other, talk and network in person. When I do these webinars, you see me, but I don't get to see you. So I'm hoping at the expo in about a month now that I'll get to see all of you there and we'll get to talk through it. This is open to investors and contractors. So That's new this year. So if you are thinking about coming, you are welcome to attend. All right. So last quick admin thing, our new listings for the week. So we've actually got 4 new Florida listings. And so I'll go over it's 4 different sets of listings. So the first one is 10 routes at $800,000. And this has a manager and a lead driver and 2 lead trucks. And this is a low stem mile dense area. And it is open for remote ownership. We've got another one that's 13 P&D routes at $775,000. This one has 2 managers with a combined experience of over 18 years and 6 spare trucks. And it is also open for remote ownership. The next one is 11 P&D routes at $935,000, 2 managers, 4 spare trucks. And then the last one is 12 P&D routes, $990,000. This one has 1 manager. And so there's a bunch of different sizes, different pieces. They're all in Florida, though, these first 4. So if you've been looking for Florida, we've got 4 new ones here that are coming out. So if you have questions on it, reach out to our team. The last one is in Michigan, and it is 9 P&D routes at $800,000, 2 managers, high margin, 2 spare trucks, and all newer trucks as well. So again, if any of those are ones you have questions on, reach out to our team. We can send you all the details, answer any questions you have on them. All right, so that is the end of kind of the admin side of this. So what I wanted to talk about today and spend some time on this afternoon is going over one of the biggest potential shakeups in the logistics space, which is the looming possibility of a strike by the UPS Teamsters. So what I'm going to do today is give just a little bit of background as to how we got here, how we're in this current situation, give some updates on where things stand today. And then I'm going to bring Jesse on a little bit later to help go through and talk through what you should be doing now to plan and prepare in the event that this does happen. So just if you haven't heard yet, July 31st of this year, just over a month away now, is the deadline for UPS to come to agreement with their workers union. And just to give you a little context on why this is so important and why this is different than a lot of other past negotiations is, so the last time UPS had a strike was in 1997. That lasted 15 days. For those of you who remember it, it was catastrophic. Bill Clinton actually had to step in and beg both sides to come to an agreement. Now, really importantly, the economy is very different today than it was then. That was in the late 90s. So news stories at the time were still having to explain the term e-commerce when they were going over this strike. That's how different the economy was then versus now. So you can only begin to imagine the impact of that and that type of strike in today's economy. And importantly for all of us looking at the FedEx space to remember is that that strike was one of the key moments in which FedEx Ground gained a huge amount of market share from the brand damage that the strike did to UPS. Now, if we look at a little bit more recent history, the last UPS negotiation was 5 years ago. And at that time, there was an agreement that was reached between UPS and the union leadership. And so when the union leaders brought that agreement back to their membership, the membership declined it, did not agree with any of the rates, did not want that to be the contract. But the union leadership went ahead and pushed it through anyway. So you can imagine the membership wasn't too happy about that. And those leaders are no longer there. So those union leaders no longer lead the union. But for 5 years, the last 5 years, the union members have felt like they got a bad deal. And they are looking to correct that this year. So especially if you look at the last few years, UPS had a couple of years of record profit gain. Some of the things around COVID, they've had some really good years. And so the membership have felt like they were given a bum deal and should have gotten a fantastic deal with the way the last 5 years have worked. So like I said, they are looking to correct this. In particular, the new leader of the union, Sean O'Brien, was specifically elected because of how strong and even militant some of his comments are around FedEx and against UPS. You can go watch him on YouTube. There's plenty of quotes to look at, but things like, we're going to push this company harder than they've ever been pushed before and make an example out of them to show the world. So from, for a while now, over a year, everyone has known that this would be an intense negotiation at the minimum. Now, here's where we are today. So there was a vote held a couple of weeks ago as to whether or not the membership wanted to proceed with a strike in the event that terms are not reached. When they released that vote, 97% of members voted for that strike to happen. So, you've got nearly unanimous backing of the members in the union for this strike to happen. Now, right now, in the last couple of weeks, and for the next couple of weeks, I would expect, we're seeing practice strikes happening across the country, which is typically one of those last steps you'll see as kind of a kind of strong arm tactic leading up to negotiations and leading through these negotiations. So we are seeing that already at UPS terminals. Now, there have been some agreements reached. The main thing is kind of around air conditioning. That's one of the biggest things UPS is touting as a positive sign, is that they've come to terms on the fact that the trucks are going to have air conditioning. But the biggest sticking points are still being hotly debated, especially around wages. Last week in particular, there was a proposal put on the table by UPS to the union that very offended the union. Sean O'Brien had a quote saying, if UPS wants to negotiate a contract for 1997 working conditions, they're going to get 1997 consequences. So it is not resolved yet, is what I would say. And right now, there is no agreement on a lot of the key terms. You'll see UPS all the time saying that they are, very confident that things are going to work out. That's what you have to say as UPS. But there are a lot of signs pointing towards this not being a successful negotiation. And Sean O'Brien has gone on record as saying he will not agree to anything that's a net neutral. It has to be a win for the union. So that's where we are today. So these next few weeks are going to be critical. And conveniently, our expo in Vegas goes from July 29th to 30th. So we will all be together live to talk through the implications at that stage when we are days away from finding out if the strike happens or not, because the July 31st is the deadline. And to be clear for everyone on here, if a strike does happen, it will be, industry shaking. UPS is significantly larger than FedEx, and there will be more packages that hit the network than nearly anyone can deal with. UPS is thought to do, to transport almost 6% of the US GDP. So this is a huge shakeup to the supply chain. But importantly for us, beyond just the volume, the brand damage that will do to UPS will have a huge benefit for FedEx in the short term and in the future. And even if a strike does not happen, there will be shippers who are already shifting their volume to FedEx and have already started to sign those contracts and pull their volume out of UPS, where they see, even if the negotiation is successful, UPS is still going to be a union. There's still this threat of a strike that doesn't exist in the FedEx network. So that is, again, kind of the current state of affairs. So I wanted you to kind of understand what led to it and what the current context is and understand why it's important for us. But with that in mind, what I wanted to do now is bring Jesse on to talk through what you should be thinking about now and the planning you may need to start doing as we lead up to the end of July. So Jesse, if you want to go ahead and jump on and jump in here.
Hey, Josh. Hey, everyone. So I was not around, Josh, for the original UPS strike. I missed it by about 7 years. I started in 2004 as a jumper for my old man. You guys have seen him on here before, Greg Smith. But we got into the business just over about 20 years ago now. And so I missed it, but I still heard the horror stories from some of my terminal managers that did precede my time there. So just to underscore what you said, Josh, it will be Armageddon if this does happen. One thing that you hear kind of around the network, and you've seen it if you're a current contractor, is FedEx typically doesn't build new terminals and hubs that far exceeds what the current demands on the network are. Not that they don't leave room to expand, but the general rule is that they kind of build for what they need in the very near term. And so a lot of these warehouses and terminals that are currently out there, they just won't be able to handle even maybe a 25% sustained gain in volume. And I just kind of thrown that number out there, maybe more, maybe less, depending on your market. But with UPS having a much bigger share, obviously it's going to just be crazy. Every single terminal, every single hub is going to be blown out. But yeah, just to prepare for that, just some things that there's a lot of overlap in terms of what you can do to prepare for a peak season, but also some differences too. So let's go through some of those. First thing is make sure you put your drivers on notice. I always want to start with the drivers because, they know what's going on. They stay up with social media. They're not unaware of this, but you do need to let them know that, look, this is not just a peak season, right? This is a potentially extended period here of just massive COVID on steroids type volume that we can expect to see. And something I want to mention too, most peaks are going to be majority e-commerce residential volume, right? This is not going to be like that. This is going to be that plus all your business stuff as well. I mean, it's going to be commercial, industrial. It's going to be the whole shebang all the way across all of your routes. We'll see massive increases. So this is not just going to be like, hey, tell your neighborhood drivers to expect 50 more stops a day. No, this is everybody expect to just do way more, as much as you can possibly do. We'll bring in new trucks, et cetera. Go ahead and start setting that narrative early just to let drivers know, hey, here's what's coming. Next thing along with drivers is obviously recruit. This is one we obviously highly recommend. Bright Flag we have for a long time here. Best in the industry if you need to get drivers brought on for this or any other reason. And so get with your recruiter ASAP on this. Don't wait until July 31st to start recruiting. As you guys may know, this is a multi-week process sometimes with getting the drivers vetted and qualified. So anyway, I would go ahead and start that now. And just kind of get ready to maybe, if you don't end up using these drivers, if they do reach terms, it's always a good idea to recruit, to be able to kind of churn over your C class drivers, we like to call them, your kind of the lower end of the people that you say, you know what, I need them right now, but if I had to replace them, great. That's the kind of people that you might be able to replace if this doesn't end up going through. But if it does, you'll be ready regardless. And then consider AVP. So, the alternative vehicle program we talked about a few weeks ago on the webinar. This is something that's going to really help you scale up. And it was a program that was designed specifically during the COVID pandemic to increase volume quickly. So your AVP drivers do not have to go through all the same hoops that your truck drivers have to go through. They can use their own personal vehicles. And so it's a good way to ramp up capacity very quickly. Now, obviously, it's going to take several AVP drivers to replicate the capacity of a single P1200 or P1000, right? I mean, your multiple Honda Civics are not going to be able to carry that load, but just be aware in terms of meeting like your time critical stops and services, AVP could really be an option that you'll want to look into. Know what the changes that just hit My Ground Biz account are. Know how to get through those menus and things on that website that we all love so much. So be ready for that. And then some out of the box things that I thought of, Josh. So number one here, talk with the shippers on your route. And if there's shippers you know of that don't use FedEx, but maybe they used them in the past, former pickups that are no longer your pickups, go and talk to the various shippers on your route that you know or suspect may do high volume pickups. Don't just think about deliveries here. That's where everyone's mind kind of goes, but you need to really think about the pickup volume. That's really what's going to hit a lot of contractors fairly hard. Getting the volume into the network is going to be as much of a bottleneck as getting it out of the network. So don't forget that pickup volume. Go talk to shippers, see how much relative volume UPS is picking up from them versus how much you guys are picking up, how much is going to other shippers, whatever. Get the lay of the land from your shippers to prepare for that. talk to your drivers and have them leverage the relationships they have or may have with the UPS drivers on their routes. So, a lot of these guys, they'll play what's called a door tag. It's kind of tag kind of has a double meaning there. They'll stick a driver or a delivery notice tag on a UPS truck, and then the UPS guy will stick a tag on the FedEx truck the next day, and they go back and forth. And that's happening, kind of a fun little thing in a lot of markets. But the point is, they have relationships with each other. They know kind of some of the ins and outs of the other's job. You need to tap into that. You need to figure out, what are these UPS drivers doing? Where's their area? What's their expected stop count? Start building out some models for what you think you might see for your own territory, so that you can know some realistic numbers to ramp up to. So definitely take advantage of those relationships. Be ready to exceed the 200 package per stop contract limit. This is a big one. Again, FedEx will be hot and heavy on pushing you to meet or exceed your pickup requirements every single day. So as you may or may not know, each stop in most contracts, I don't know if every single one of them is like this, but by and large, you have a 200 package per stop limit that if you get 201 packages, you can leave that extra package on the dock. Now, most people are going to take it because they want the extra revenue, but that applies on both the pickup and delivery side. So if you have the capacity, I would be prepared to get a lot of extra boxes because, let's face it, a lot of times you're getting paid a lot less per package than you are just to make the stop. Just a breakdown might be, let's say you're making $3.25 to make the stop and 13 cents per package, just throwing some numbers out there. Well, if you're used to picking up 50 or 75 boxes and there's 275 boxes, well, you've just turned a, $10, $15 stop into a $50 stop, right? So your revenue is going to significantly increase if it's worth it from a time perspective to have the driver sit there and get the extra boxes. If he's got room for them, make sure they're able to do that and that they do have the discipline to sit there and do that. That's going to be really good extra revenue for you on the pickup side. Get your fleet all ready to roll. I mean, most of us, I know the contractors, some of them that I've worked for, they always have the spare junker in the back lot that's just they're robbing parts off of it and stuff like that. Get that one ready to go. Get all your spares ready to go. Talk to rental companies ahead of time. Get as much capacity as you can possibly get. Again, peak season, you typically see a 50 to 100% increase. This is going to be even more than that. So it's going to be first come, first serve on getting these rentals, getting your spares. Every spare cubic foot of space that you have is going to be utilized. So get all your spare trucks up and running. Last couple things here, DRO. So of course, Josh, I have to mention DRO every time I'm on. So make sure your DRO is set up to handle dramatically increased volume. And the way that you do that is when you're looking at the anchor areas or the little geographic regions that are subdividing your territory, you can assign this little territory to this driver, this one to this driver. They'll have a certain number of stops that will plot in there. And you want to be able to move these anchor areas between routes with a not humongous number of stops in it. So you make sure they have 20 to 25 stops in each of your anchors on a heavy day. I would cut that down to probably 10 stops maximum in each little anchor area to make sure that when you see the volume fluctuation, when it starts to increase, you start to see 20, 30, 40 stops that used to be 10 stops in the same geographic area, you are able to redelegate that region to whatever truck is able to handle that capacity. So if what I said doesn't make any sense, get with us afterwards. I'll be glad to explain that more in depth, but that's mostly for my current contractors that kind of know the terminology there. So last couple of things again. So this, I mentioned this will be not just residential volume. This will be all types of volume all across your routes. So just be ready for that. And you will almost certainly hit your daily stop threshold, whatever that is. If you haven't checked your Schedule F in a while, that's where that's located. Make sure to look and see what your daily stop threshold is because it's almost a guarantee you will hit it. Typically, it's about, again, it's going to vary by market, vary by contract. It's about 2.5 to 3 times set higher than what your average daily stop count is. So if that just kind of tells you a little bit of what kind of numbers to expect, be ready to hit that surge threshold there. And then the very last thing I'll say, last but absolutely not least, it's going to be crazy. It's going to be a rush. Do not neglect safe driving, safe operations. Make sure your drivers are still laser focused on safety. You do not want the extra volume, the new drivers coming in, the lack of experience. You're going to be at increased exposure to having more accidents due to that lack of experience. So just make sure everybody's on the same page. Look, we're out there to get the boxes to the door, but we want the most important package, you as the driver, to make it home every day. So drive that message home. I think if you follow those, you're going to be well positioned to handle as much of the volume as you possibly can.
Perfect. All right. Appreciate that, Jesse. And like we said, this is an evolving situation. And so when we get to Expo, that will be kind of we will be guiding you on preparations for what is the reality at that time. So we'll continue to update on this, but that will be kind of here's what the situation is. Here's what we are headed into in the next, week. So that will be kind of the last check-in we'll do on this as we head into it. Okay. So we are going to open it up to completely open Q&A now. You can ask questions about what we talked about today, anything else. As a reminder, before we get into it, the question of the day is, what is the dumbest or most ridiculous way you have injured yourself or gotten an injury? So we'll answer that first. So Jesse, what's your answer there?
Well, we need to have a lower body edition and an upper body edition for all my different answers here, Josh. But I'm going to go with the time that I smashed my left index finger in the bulkhead door during busiest time of peak season 3 years ago, and completely lost my fingernail for the next 8 or so months while I grew back. So that's my big one there.
Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah.
Mine is my only scar on my body. It's my finger. When I was in high school, it was like 2 a.m. And I guess I was delirious and making bad decisions. I was trying to open a lollipop and I could not get it open. And I don't know what was wrong with me. And so what I did is I grabbed a pocket knife to open that lollipop. And I opened the lollipop. I also opened my finger. So I just remember running upstairs and being like, hey, we need to do something. I think I have a serious injury. and my parents just in utter disbelief that I had done this for a lollipop. So yeah, the only scar on my body is definitely one of my dumbest injuries. Okay, so we are going to get into Q&A now. So first one is here from Benjamin. Are there opportunities to scale FedEx outside of North America, like into Europe? So what I would say is FedEx does operate outside and, in Mexico, in Asia, in Europe. I do not believe there is anywhere similar to the same contractor model where you can buy in the same way you do here. There may be opportunities where you can partner with FedEx there, but as far as I'm aware, there's not a contractor model to buy into overseas. It does look different over there. Could be wrong. I will say I have not done a significant amount of research into the FedEx model in Europe. Next one's from Dale. So his injury is he dropped his hairbrush on the floor and slammed his head really hard on the bathroom counter when he bent out to pick it up. I know those situations. So he said a group of Amazon drivers in California are attempting to organize a union. Will that have any impact on FedEx CSPs? No. Here's what I would say. Any union conversation is about the scariest thing FedEx can ever hear. And if there's anything FedEx will react fastest to, it's even the hint of a threat of someone thinking about a union. So if anything, the only effect I would expect is FedEx being even more cognizant and militant around any conversation around a union in those areas. But it would be, I would be shocked if there's anything that could ever even happen. They would terminate your contract if they heard anyone talking about a union. That is something they would not play around with or try to think about. So I would not expect that to have any, large impact, if any. The only thing I could think of is that, if they do strike, if that does lead to them losing their jobs, or, maybe that's a potential workforce that could come from it. But as far as how it'll actually affect your terminal, very little. All right. Next one here is from David. Fell down an escalator at the Philadelphia train station. Spread eagle, busted shin. No one touched me. Just lost my balance with some luggage. Man, the combination of the fact that an escalator is not smooth and is full of sharp angles, and the fact that everyone would see you, I feel that pain both emotionally and physically there. So here's an interesting one. I mentioned that one of the few things that UPS has come to agreement with the Teamsters on is that they're going to allow or require air conditioning on all the vehicles. So David's question is, you're driving a lot, the door's open, you're in and out of the truck. Does air conditioning really help? So Jesse, what's your opinion on air conditioning? And then I'll kind of go into a little bit of why UPS was pushing for it in the negotiation.
Yeah, I mean, as a former driver, now admittedly, I drove a white truck versus a brown truck. So it's going to be slightly different, not very different though. Air conditioning does not make a big difference. When it gets to be as hot as it is right now, like a heat wave we've got, it does not make a difference. You can run it wide open with all the windows and doors open that you can, and you're still going to be sweating bullets. So in my opinion, it seems like more of a nod to the optics of the situation more than actually a substantive help to the drivers, because it does not make that much difference.
Yeah, that's right. And even, when UPS was originally responding, they were basically like, it doesn't make a lot of difference. It's not worth spending money on. I think that's still the case. There is a certain amount. Brown trucks are definitely hotter than the white trucks. There were a few large, or at least a lot of publicity on a few incidents where UPS drivers passed out in their trucks and it went viral. So a couple of things like that, and just the fact that it's a union negotiation where they're basically saying we want to improve the quality of life of our workers. A key area is wages, but we also want to, even if air conditioning isn't a huge win, it's air conditioning is better than no air conditioning is kind of their stance. So I would say, there are plenty of contractors who don't have it in the FedEx space on their vehicles. Air conditioning also has some additional potential repair and maintenance challenges that can come from it. So it's always one of those things, maybe there's some routes that are more rural with more drive time. Sure. Air conditioning can be really impactful, yes. But some of the ones where you're in and out, constantly, that door's always going to be open, and it's going to be hard for it to ever really cool down. A fan on the dashboard, a fan that's powerful that you feel, even if it's not dramatically changing the interior feeling, just the feeling of airflow on your face can be more helpful than actual air conditioning. Stupid injury from an anonymous: skiing beyond my capabilities on a black diamond run. I hear that. I think I used to be more likely to do that than I am now. Now I see the bottom of that hill, and I know that the top's not going to look any better, so I stay away from it. So help kind of think through, and I can weigh in on this too, Jesse, on why would you start to ramp up on drivers and trucks now, even though a strike is only a temporary situation? So why wouldn't you just wait until we know for sure that strike's going to happen, like the week of, to start ramping up?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a gamble. I mean, there's no doubt that it's not a sure thing, but as you may or may not know, this is a multi-week process, as I kind of mentioned earlier, with getting drivers. Number one, I mean, actually, if you compare drivers to trucks, if there's a delay in the network on trucks, and we look at like rentals, you have to start looking at rentals for peak season in July, and if not earlier, depending on your market. So, drivers might actually be the shorter end of the stick in terms of the ramp up time, but you've got to start now in terms of if you think that this is a likely possibility. And then what do you do with those resources if you don't end up using them? I'll be honest with you, there's plenty of contingency opportunities in the network as it is. Now, again, we can go back and forth on whether that's a good or bad thing. But bottom line is, if you bring on resources, FedEx will make sure there's a place that you can use them if you're willing to put them on the road and have them travel and get them in a truck. There is definitely work to be done in the network if you just want to make sure that they have a place.
Yeah. And I would also point to the fact that, it will be a temporary situation. The strike's not going to be permanent. Obviously, the strike has to end. The economy can't function without it. But the first time a strike of this magnitude happened in 97 led to FedEx being what it is today. So if a strike like this happens again, even if it's one day, that shaking of certainty in shippers and businesses will lead to an increase for everyone, for FedEx, for contractors. And so while that level of volume is not going to continue, there will be an increase in what the network is worth and what the amount of volume you're dealing with as we move into the future. So I think Jesse's points are valid, but also just to say that all of that volume is not going to stay, but that will lead to some kind of permanent impact on our future here. So question from Jason, didn't put his injury. If you want to submit it later, Jason, I'll come back and read it. Is it a good time now to buy in a smaller business and wait for FedEx to add business to you at no cost? So I think that is always something you should be thinking about when you're thinking about entering the space. One of the things I like to tell people that we always like to say is buy a good business that's run well, that you can run with no issues, so that you can understand the business, wrap your arms around the operations, and as the business grows, you can continue to grow with it. There's plenty of other reasons why you might buy a large business if you're looking for, economies of scale. But I think the point Jason's kind of asking about and thinking about is, are things like Express and the UPS strike and those types of tailwinds, is that a good reason to buy smaller with that expectation? And I think there's plenty of validity there. I think it's, in general, what you should be thinking about is we're kind of at an inflection point where you may be able to enter the space when it is lower, when volume is lower than what it will be, potentially 6 months from now. So regardless of if you're buying small or big, I think it's important to think about what that potential growth could look like when you're planning what your future looks like in the space, and be ready for where you could be 6 months, a year from now. Tyler, injury. When I was a child, I was taking off my shoe and kicked myself in my eye and had to wear an eye patch for a week. That's another one of those where you get hit with the shame as well as the pain. So I feel you, Tyler. So do we think a new contractor should push stand up to after July 31st or before? So this is actually a similar answer to how I would answer, should I stand up before or after peak season? Where if you plan on standing up before, you should have the reality and be planning and thinking about how to handle peak. And if you don't think that you can handle that type of scale up, that type of build up, it may be safer to wait until after. At the same time, if you wait till after, you're not going to get to, take advantage of any of that revenue gain and that potential profitability gain that will come during that uplift. So your goal, if you're trying to stand up in this next month, is to be ready for whatever comes if you want to take advantage of that profitability as well. Now, what I would definitely tell you is if you're looking at a stand up of, what is July 31st the Sunday? Let me see. So July 30th is the Sunday. So, or the Saturday is the 29th. So if the 29th is your stand-up date, you're probably okay. But just know that if the strike is still imminent at that point, there's going to be some uncertainty around where a terminal might or might not allow you to stand up. It's the same as if you were standing up, the week after Black Friday or the week before Christmas, where that's kind of the pivotal point. So you might run into some difficulties where the terminal might force your stand-up back a week. Or if you're standing up the week after, if the strike is still going on the week after, expect that there may be some challenges in that stand-up process. If volume's exploding, the terminal's just not going to have as much time to approve new people coming in. So same thing as I would say before peak is if you can get prepared, if you can be comfortable, or if you're willing to take that gamble because you want to take advantage of that revenue and profitability potential, then I'd push for it. But just know that risk going in, that you're headed into some craziness, and ideally make sure that the contractor you're buying from is able to provide some kind of transition support through that period, because you'll need it. Now, John asked questions about how FedEx Ground is moving away from Canada. Now, there's a whole webinar. If you go back to our webinar from last week, I did a whole webinar on this and talking through what that meant. But basically, for those of you who haven't seen it, for those of you who had questions on it, basically, FedEx Express is taking over Canada as opposed to is taking over the FedEx Ground network in Canada, as opposed to the inverse, which we're expecting here, where FedEx Ground is taking over FedEx Express. Now, the Canadian market looks really different, just so you know. It's much more rural, much more spread out, and Express is significantly bigger there than Ground. So those are a few of the things that went into it, but I would not expect that to happen in the US. Very few select markets, like we saw it in Alaska and Hawaii, but both of those are very unique states. Alaska looks a lot like Canada, very rural and remote. And then Hawaii, you basically needed planes to deliver between those islands. So those were always going to look different than the lower 48. And so we've seen it across the country where Express is rolling into Ground. We're continuing to see different waves of that. And that's what I would expect in, the vast majority of contracts. So a question, I want to buy, should I wait to see the outcomes of the UPS situation just in case routes are overpriced? What I would say is we are taking nothing around Express or UPS into account when looking at valuations. That's a question you can ask a broker before you talk to them. But right now, there aren't any valuations taking any of that into account. That's more of a reality for contractors to be aware of and for you to be aware of as an investor. But if your thought is, maybe they're too expensive now, and so I'll wait, and a strike does happen, they're not going to get cheaper after the strike with all the volume changes, with the way that the market will look after that. So, and if the strike doesn't happen, that's not going to affect valuations either, because it's not a part of current valuation. So you can wait. That's completely your prerogative. But just know that right now they're not inflated based on any kind of expectations around growth for UPS or Express. All right. And then a similar question around Express that came through. So does anyone else have questions? We've kind of gone through everything. Oh, here's one that just came in. So was playing tennis in a dream and busted my hand on a bunk bed. That is a tragedy. So this is one. So he's basically saying, the question is, is there going to be any kind of incentive around Schedule K and ramp up? Why isn't FedEx offering that? If we get, the thing with the strike is that FedEx doesn't want to offer incentives until they know it's going to happen. Right now, there's no guarantee that the strike will happen, so they wouldn't offer any kind of benefit. What I would say is that if a strike does happen, there's the potential that there's kind of some retroactive incentives they would provide. We saw some of these bonuses happen during COVID, where volume spiked, and there were some COVID relief payments that FedEx did to offset some of those costs. And that's what I would expect in a similar situation. Like Jesse said, if you do go above your surge threshold, if you can maintain that in any way, there is an additional incentive in your contract where you get an extra amount per stop for everything above the threshold. So if you can go above that, there is a significant amount of money there that can come from those surge stops. But like what happened during COVID, if there is this kind of huge expense that has to be taken on, I would expect some kind of incentive that could come from FedEx, just to kind of keep everybody afloat. Because if this amount of volume comes in, FedEx needs you to be successful too. We're all hands on deck, everyone working to try to get the volume handled and delivered. And so they can't have contractors failing either. So there's reasons why they would do it. It's just that right now, until they know for sure it's happening, I wouldn't expect them to ever do any kind of incentive until there's a guarantee that the strike's happening.
Hey, Josh, I have one thing I just thought of while you're saying that. So maybe if you have good relationships with the managers at your terminal, a really good bellwether of what the volume is going to do is how much they scale up their package handlers and sortation personnel. So if you can keep your finger on the pulse or whatever channels you may have at your terminal, that'll tell you where FedEx is going and what they're thinking and how likely they anticipate it being. So that way you can kind of match your ramp up with what they're planning, so that, again, you're both going to be out if it doesn't happen, right? But at least you're not just completely unprepared while they're scaling up, or vice versa.
Yeah. And as we get closer, I could be wrong, 2 weeks, 1 week out, as we get that close to the strike, FedEx could make some kind of announcement around it, but we'll see. But I would not be surprised. And so I think that's a great call, is at least get that metric of, if FedEx is investing in resources, you should too. Perfect. All right. Well, I don't see any more questions. So that's all we have time for today. Again, as a reminder, two important events coming up. One, if you have not been to a summit, if you are still looking at this space for the first time, our next New Investor Summit is next Friday, July 7th, and it is our last virtual one until December. So if you are looking for ease, if you're looking to be able to watch it from your couch, this is the best bet. You're going to have to wait, another 6 months. So if you've never been to one of those, come to it. I will be on there. Jesse will be on there. We will talk about all things FedEx. And it is designed around you making that decision on if this is the right industry for you. And then the other important one is the expo. So hopefully I will see everyone on this as we come up to the expo in July 29th and 30th in Vegas. And we will be there live talking about what is happening with the strike. Hopefully I will see all of you in person. And again, Jesse, fantastic to see you again, talk through all of this. Always good to have you. For everybody else, we will see you next time on the webinar. Thanks, guys.
Bye, y'all.